Coach Steve House's hometown is Connersville, Indiana, most recently known as the home of Butler's Matt Howard. Coach House won 9 varsity letters while in high school, and he had always looked forward to a coaching career. He continued his education at Ball State University and lettered in football his junior and senior year. Following graduation, he became head football and baseball coach at Centerville, Indiana. After 3 years, Coach House moved on to Greensburg High School, where he continued teaching social studies and headed the football and track programs. After 10 years at Greensburg and establishing himself as the winningest coach in track and football history, he and his family moved to Montgomery County, where he was hired as an assistant principal of Southmont High School and athletic director. When Stan Parrish left Wabash and Greg Carlson was hired in 1983, Coach House offered his services as a volunteer assistant, thus beginning a long and storied tenure at Wabash. He returned in 1990 football season as a part-time coach while serving as the middle school principal at Southmont. In 1998, Coach House was asked to serve as assistant baseball coach and help the Little Giants to their only baseball conference championship, establishing one of the top records at 25-12. Coach House has closed out his football career after having won numerous conference championships that now include baseball and track. After retiring as an administrator at Southmont, Coach House worked with first-generation students in a grant program at Wabash. Coach House had a 47-year coaching career that has touched the lives of thousands of athletes. He and his wife Judy have been married for 47 years, and they now have 4 grandchildren in Brownsburg. Their son Kelly is married to the former Debbie Anderson. Kelly was inducted into the Wabash College Athletic Hall of Fame 2 years ago. Coach House has lots of stories he relishes the opportunity to share with you today, with the chapel talk entitled, "Have You Heard the One About Coach Steve House?"
I know why you're here. Free donuts. I feel like this is a very appropriate time to make somewhat of a farewell address. I'm trying to catch up with Brett Favre, but I think he's still one up on me, but we'll see what next year brings. Anyhow, Jake gave you a little history. I've got quite a few stories to share with you. I'm thinking back and going through this with my wife last evening. I thought, well, I can't really tell that one. This is on video and it's going on there. And then I said, what about this? I can't really tell that one. And a lot of you have heard a lot of these stories, and I'll try to review a few of those. But I feel like I've led 3 lives. I was a teacher, coach in high school, administrator, came to Wabash part-time in 1983, became a full-time coach and director of student activities, I think maybe 10 years ago or so. But I've been blessed, and as I said, I want to share some of these stories throughout that 47-year career and talk about some of the interesting characters I've had the privilege to coach and tutor and so forth. And then I've asked Jake to give me a 5-minute warning, like the 2-minute warning in the NFL. The only reason they have that, I think, is more commercials. I don't know if you've ever timed an NFL football game, but time it someday with a stopwatch. See how many actual minutes they play, and then in another setting, time the number of commercials and how much time that takes, and it's quite extraordinary. Anyhow, a lot of you probably don't realize I started my athletic career with the Cowboys. Now, that was the 8th Street Cowboys. We were a pretty good Pee-wee football team, and kind of dominated things. And I wasn't all conference. I tell people I was all city block on that team. And I was, but it started that way from Connersville High School. I got sick and tired of hearing about Matt Howard, and then the way that finished up, that was very embarrassing. But we had an undefeated football team in high school. Back then, there were no playoffs. Later on, they had adopted a playoff system, but it was all mythical at that point. And I think we finished third in the state that particular year, being undefeated. That was also the first year, to date myself, face bars were invented. And I could show you why it's important to have face bars, but I won't do that at this point because my grandchildren ask me to take out my partial once in a while to show them. But anyhow, we had two helmets with face bars, and they had the one bar, and we couldn't decide who should get the two helmets. So we gave one to our middle linebacker, and for some reason we gave the other one to the quarterback. But anyhow, and then from there, it evolved to the big cages and those kinds of things. Also, back in the high school days, they said water will make you sick. And we thought, oh, okay. So I, for one, trying to be creative, hid a lemon. We had the helmets that had the suspension system, which, by the way, I think there were less concussions at that time back in those days than there are today. So I hid a lemon in my helmet, and when no one was looking, I would take the lemon out and take a big bite of the lemon. That didn't work. But there was no water. They said it'd make us sick, and I don't know why, but it doesn't seem like as many people died from heat exhaustion and all that as nowadays. Went to Ball State University, which at that time was called Ball State Teachers College. There were only 1,000 students in each class at that time. And I wasn't smart enough to go to Wabash. Some of you think I'm a Wabash grad. I'm not. I got kidnapped at 10 o'clock one night by some Sphinx Club guys, and they drugged me over here, and I had to ride that goat down the aisle, push a peanut around the track, and all that kind of stuff. But I am privileged to be a honorary part of the group. Anyhow, talking about college days, I joined a fraternity, and in those days, actually they made a movie about our fraternity. I think it was called Animal House. And in those days, we really did have a hell week, and I thought I'd share a couple of those things. I was supposed to swear to secrecy back 50 years ago and say, don't tell anybody, that you did these things. We had a guy in our fraternity, sort of like John Belushi. He's still living today, so I'll call him Bubba in case you run into him. And Bubba wasn't the smartest guy in the fraternity. He said he wasn't in the top half of his class, but he made it possible. I asked Bubba one time, I said, what do you think about apathy and ignorance? He said, I don't know and I don't care. But we had Hell Week. We had paddling. We called paddling at that time generals. One whack was 1 star, 2 whacks or 2 stars, 3 whacks, so forth. And we'd get in a big circle. I think there were 20 or 30 of us. And each active would have his paddle, that was given to him as a pledge, and 1 whack. And the rule was like 6 inches from the buttocks, but some of them weren't very smart in how they measured, so that didn't work either. And I remember a big thing back then was that we would kidnap an active and take him out in the woods and tie him up to a tree or something. Then we'd go back to the house, all laughing and so forth. So I remember one night we kidnapped Phil Copeland, and we took him out to a cornfield somewhere around Portland, Indiana, from Muncie. And we were all laughing, having a good time, tied him up to a corn stalk or something. We got back to the house. Phil beat us back. Phil had his paddle, and he was kind of warming up, and we had a little active general session that evening. We also had, during Hell Week, we had, like you guys, we had air raids. Only our air raids were the USS Sigtal, and we had these big cardboard boxes. We had 2 beer cans taped together like binoculars, and when air raid was called, you jumped in your boat and you shot down the airplanes, similar like you do today. Well, the other thing is we carried goodie boxes, and in the goodie boxes you had gum, candy, and cigarettes. And probably more guys smoked cigarettes back then than today. But anyhow, one of the evenings of Hell Week, we had this room with these French glass doors, and they put us all in this room. And they said, "You guys know what you have to do?" We said, "No, what do we have to do?" "Well, you can leave the room when all your cigarettes are gone from your goodie boxes." Well, the guys that smoked, they thought this was great. They had 4 or 5 cigarettes going. And then we had a pledge, a brother in our class named Ray Miller, and Ray was a paraplegic. He was in a wheelchair. And Ray was inside, going along with everything, had cigarettes in his ears and mouth and nose. And pretty soon it was obvious that we could not see the hand in front of us. And the smoke was really, really bad. So, and then somebody noticed that Ray had keeled over. Ray coughed down. And the actives outside realized they could see something going on, so they opened the door and they wheeled Ray out. Ray went, "He's alive, he's alive," and they whipped him back in. So that was called Smoke Out. We had a couple of great parties. Again, I say it's kind of like they must have made a movie about it, but somewhere somebody came up with a fire truck, a real fire truck. And we called this sorority and we said, "We're going to have a party. But for the party, you have to dress in cocktail dresses, high heels, so forth, so on. And you will be picked up in this fire truck." So the fire truck goes to the sorority, pick up the girls. They get back to the fraternity house, and we have a 2-story fraternity house. They said, "Oh, we forgot to tell you, to get in and go along with the theme of this party, you have to climb the ladder and go through the 2nd-story window. Once you get in that window, you have to descend down the fire pole to enter the party. And then you go in the first room, and the ceiling is lowered, so you have to, like a 3-foot ceiling, you have to crawl through the rooms to get to the hospitality part of the party and the dance and so forth. So that was quite a party. Another party that stands out in my mind was, we had a guy in our fraternity, his name was Charlie Smith. We called him Charlie Coyote because he kind of looked like a coyote. He was about 6'4" and weighed about 110 pounds. So and again, I don't know where they came up with this. Somebody borrowed a casket someplace. So they brought the casket into the living room. We put Charlie in a 3-piece suit, put him in the casket. We set up the living room with folding chairs, and we had house mothers back then. House mothers were supposed to kind of, be like a mother of the house. But we set Mom Morris right on the front row. The girls hadn't arrived yet. Mom Morris had her Kleenex going. Charlie's in the casket. We put some old Tennessee Ernie Ford music on. The girls were coming in, and they thought they were coming to a party, and we said, "Oh, we're sorry. There's been a terrible death in the fraternity. We haven't had time to make arrangements. We thought you'd want to be a part of our ceremony and passing for Charlie." The girls started crying. They sat down by Mom, and they're all crying and passing out the Kleenex. Tennessee Ernie Ford's "Old Rugged Cross." The girls are crying. And then somebody slips on, and you guys may or may not recall a guy named Chubby Checkers that came out with a record called The Twist. Somebody puts the twist on. "Come on, baby," and Charlie rises up out of the casket and he starts doing the twist. And the girls start beating us. They're beating us with their purses and calling us names, kicking us. And they ran out of the house, and so that party didn't end up so good, but it started really well. So, as I said, I think they made a movie about us. All right, then after college, I started at Centerville High School. I was a 21-year-old head coach, graduated from summer school, got married, started football practice. Back in those days, you high school guys remember, it was always squirrel season, August 15th, and hot, 2-a-days, 2 hours to each session. I think we did give them water by then. Told them not to worry about the lemons. We'll give you a drink, give you a break, so forth. But we had no facilities at Centerville, Indiana at that time. We had no home field. We played our home games at Cambridge City. My assistant coach was an industrial arts teacher, so we went into an elementary gym and bought some 2x4s, some chicken wire, and we made us a coaching office. The guys for their locker had no lockers, but we gave them put hooks on the wall so they could hang up their equipment, and that's how we started out. We played Brookville High School, my very first varsity coaching game, and they beat us 47-0. And at that time, they were undefeated, I think, the previous year. And then the second year we opened with them again, they beat us 14-7. The third year, they had a 21-game winning streak, and we upset them and won that game. And when we got back to Centerville, the superintendent had again gotten a fire truck, and we rode around Centerville, the town. They got one filling station and a cooler of warm pop out front with a dog with an infected ear laying there, and that was it's kind of like Mayberry at that time. So anyhow, 3 years there, won 2 conference championships, 2 in baseball. Had a good bunch, and there was a couple of guys that stand out in my mind there at Centerville. One was a guy named Rusty Nelson. Rusty was like 6 foot tall, 280 pounds, a freshman. He wore a size 8 something helmet. We didn't have one. And so the athletic director called, Indiana, Notre Dame, Purdue. Nobody had a head that big that played football. So Rusty went ahead and practiced, and his mom kept calling me at nights and saying, Rusty says his ears hurt because you're making him tackle with no helmet. I said, no, we're not doing that. But so anyhow, Rusty's helmet finally comes in. The first day he has it, I find out he's driving his tractor in his football uniform with his new helmet down US 40 through Centerville in his tractor with his football suit. The athletic director came up to me before practice started. He said, Coach, I got some bad news. We got that helmet for Rusty. It cost, I don't know what it cost, a lot of money. But Rusty was chewing tobacco and spitting out through the helmet, so I had to kick him off the football team. So Rusty didn't even get to play. We had this big helmet, and that was the end of his career. We had another guy named Jim Matthews. His nickname was Stinky. Stinky didn't like the shower apparently, but he was a pretty good football player. So we're playing Greenfield. Greenfield were like, this is in the 60s, monsters of the Midway. And it's like 40 or 50-0 at halftime. I go into halftime trying to figure out what I'm going to, it's 40 to 50 to nothing. What am I going to say? Stinky's over in the corner just crying. I go up and I said, I didn't call him Stinky, but I said, Jim, it'll be all right. We'll start over the second half. But I just broke up with her yesterday. I don't know. I thought I was in love. So, anyway, that was Centerville, and Then I moved on to Greensburg, and I inherited a team at Greensburg. This was 1967. They'd been 9-1. We were in the South Central Conference. We played Bloomington. They had one school then. We played Columbus. They had one school. Jeffersonville. Really, really good conference. Shelbyville, Columbus, so forth. And didn't know the guys. And a lot of seniors had graduated. Bill Bless, who later became coach at what's UIndy today, back then University of Indianapolis, has two sons now, head coaches, I think Mooresville and Columbus North. Or actually it's Avon, Columbus North. Anyway, I inherited a team and didn't know these guys. So this one kid come up and said he wanted to come out for football. His name was Otis McConnell. Otis was 6'2", about 220. Met the eyeball test. I said, yeah, Otis, we'll see if we try to find you a spot. So Otis practices. Next day, Otis is missing. Next day, he's missing again, so he's missed 3 or 4 days. Back then, we had these old two-man sleds called the Crowther two-man sled, and we're lined up and we're tackling it. Otis is not there again. And our practice area was surrounded by woods, and I heard this blood-curdling scream, and out running from the woods, all clean white uniform, is Otis McConnell, running. The guys jump back out of the way from the drill. Otis hits the two-man sled, turns it completely over, runs into the other side of the woods, never seen again. I said, what happened to Otis the next day? They said, oh, Coach, didn't you hear he got kicked out of school? I said, for what? He would grab thermostats and tear them off the wall, and he thought that was funny. We also had a guy named Berlin Miller. Coach Hoffman's sitting back there, and he's heard all these stories, and they are true. Berlin played his freshman year, and I'm setting up in the stands watching the JV game. Berlin's playing in the line, and he's just screwing up right and left. So I go down at halftime and said, Berlin, by the way, we wrote Berlin's plays on his thigh guards. Right side was on the right leg, left side on the left. You probably had teammates like that too. But I go down at half and say, Berlin, are you right tackle or are you left? He said, Coach, I was right. No, I was left. Coach, I don't know what I is. I just here to kill. I said, okay. Okay, you play defense. Berlin, the next year, we were handing out equipment, and Berlin rides up on a horse. He's this big cowboy hat. I noticed on his left arm, he had initials starting up the shoulder and going down to the elbow, and he also had X's through these initials that he'd carved in his arm. I said, Berlin, what is that on your arm? He said, Coach, these are my girlfriends, and when I break up with them, I just X them out and put in the new one. He said, I was here to get my equipment. I said, Berlin, I don't think you're eligible. He said, why not? I said, you didn't pass a class last year. Okay, I guess I'll go on to Texas and giddy up. And he just rode his horse right on down the street. So that was Berlin. I went on to. Then when we came to Montgomery County, I got a few principal stories to share with you. 5 minute one, you doing? Okay. And I was there about 20 years. Started out as assistant principal and athletic director. As assistant principal, you get to handle all the discipline problems. So one day, we had 2 assistants. Mike Hallis was the other, and Ken Kudre, who's a big man, and I'm telling you this because part of the story, was our principal. And I get a call in my office. They said, Mr. House, there's a girl in the back parking lot that's stealing a school bus. And we had kids from the Ladoga Children's Home, and this one girl came from the children's home. Most of these kids, were juvenile delinquents, and problematic for me, of course, as head of discipline. So Hallis and I run the back parking lot, and this 8th grade girl is trying to drive this bus, and she's, popping the clutch, and the bus is going, And Hallis jumps in front of the bus, like, halt. And then he realizes this girl may not know how to stop the bus. So he jumps out of the way. We get her out of the bus, and we're dragging her, kicking her heels to the principal's office. And we take her, going through the cafeteria, and Mr. Kudre, the principal, has no clue what's going on, but he sees this girl all distraught, crying and kicking her heels. And he said, "Well, Mary, what's the matter?" And he went to put his arm around her, and she grabbed his tie, said, "Get your freaking hands out of me," and starts twirling him around like by the tie, and he's running around following it. He always wore clip-on ties from that day after. So we got the sheriff and got her taken care of and hauled off, and that was a pretty famous episode there. Another incident was girl fights. Girls fight. They have rings, and they have blood and hair pulling and name calling and kicking. And so I had this big girl fight. We suspended both girls, or I think I paddled girls back then. I paddled them or something. But the mother came in all upset. This one mom came in, and she worked at a bar, I think down at Stoney's or somewhere. And she came in and was not happy because of her daughter. Obviously, they always say, "I didn't start the fight, I defended myself," so forth, so on. Not happy because her daughter was being suspended. Well, as we're sitting there and the mother's getting more and more excited, she starts to hyperventilate. And she's hyperventilating, and she had this long black hair and very low-cut blouse. And the reason I say that is because there was a tattoo of a big spider on her left breast. But she's hyperventilating, and all I could think of, I remembered from some first aid class, if people hyperventilate, you're supposed to put a sack or a bag over their head. And I'm looking around. I have no sack or bag, but I got this briefcase that kind of, opens up. So I take the briefcase and I slap it on her head. And about that time, one of the other guidance counselors is walking down the hall, not aware anything's going on, and she sees this mom in there with this briefcase and his hair hanging out and a spider on her boob. And so I say, "Hey, another day at the office, Yep. So those were. One other case. This was. We had a drug caper, and we had a kid that was selling what he thought was, or what the kids thought were cocaine, and I forget how he was packaging the product or whatever. So we get this in the office, and the assistant principal and the other assistant and I are across the desk from the principal. He sets this up on his desk, and he pours it out. I take my finger and do one of that. He says, "What are you doing, House?" He said, "That stuff could kill you. You don't know what it is." I saw him do it on Mod Squad. And they said, "Book him, Dano." So I thought, anyhow, I had to run in and spit it out because it could have been rat poison or whatever, So we had a few capers like that. All right, I'm going to get serious here for about 5 minutes, and then we'll go to lunch. As I said, I've been truly blessed. I wanted to share with you the last part, why I'm here. And this came up, and the Lord works in mysterious ways, but this came up because of an article I just read in a coaching magazine by Grant Taft. And Then the next day, after reading this article, I saw Tyler's email saying they needed a speaker, and I thought, well, this might be a good opportunity to pass along some things that may be helpful to you guys. I'm saying at one point or another, all of you will become some type of a coach. It might be a mentor, it might be a big brother or a father. You're going to be some kind of a coach. You're going to be an influential person to some kid. And a lot of you have already accepted those roles and doing those now. But we all look forward as coaches to seeing kids grow and mature and develop as we coach. And it's always been that way, and it always will be, that we'll be a power of influence to somebody. And anyone that's been around for several decades, like myself, will tell you that times have changed and kids have changed. Football-wise, offenses spread all over the field, no huddle, bigger, faster, stronger kids. Defenses then have to adapt and become more flexible and do what's necessary to stop the offense. But if you go back several decades, we can see big changes in our culture and in our society. And those changes mean that we as coaches have had to change the way we lead and that we coach. Now, I'm not saying that we have to change as far as fundamentals or in leadership, but we've had to adapt the way we do things. I was thinking of 3 out of my 4 grandkids today have their own cell phone, their own iPod, and their own laptops. Only one that does not is because she's 2 and she's probably not far off from catching up. But if I want to communicate with my grandkids, I got to pull out their earplugs, take away the video game, and then try to converse with them. And that's like society today. When we try to converse with our own athletes here on campus, sometimes we got to get their attention by pulling out their earplug or doing hand signals so that they know that we want to talk with them. So as coaches, what I'm saying is now we have added responsibilities. Coaches have to understand and meet the needs of the social issues that are facing kids today. And getting back to Grant Taft's article, the main point he's talking about is the fact that so many kids today come from fatherless homes. They don't have a role model, and there's a big correlation between those kids and some of these social issues that I'm about to mention. They did a survey of some 4,000 coaches around the country through the American Football Coaches Association. And in descending order, these are the top 5 issues that coaches and young people have to deal with today. Number 1 was peer pressure, drugs, gangs, criminal activity, premarital sex. Number 2 was respect for women, respect for girls, respect for authority, respect for themselves, respect for coaches and teammates. Number 3 was home life, single-parent homes, lack of positive male role models, parental pressure, troubles in the household, poor parenting. Number 4 was entitlement, selfishness, lack of dedication, looking at sports as a right, not a privilege, feeling that the world owes them something. Coaches now must realize that whether or not they want to be, they have become surrogate fathers. This is a huge but important responsibility. There are many athletes throughout the country that have no home to go to. They're homeless. They have no place to go for an evening meal. Best example of that was a year ago or 2 years ago when Blindside came out, the story of Michael Orr. And number 5, drugs and alcohol. I recently heard 2 of our athletes talking about their generation, and it was very upsetting to hear them say that they are tired of their generation being mostly concerned with rap music, and marijuana. And that's pretty sad when they themselves recognize that these are problems among their generation. The U.S. Justice Department came out with some statistics that clearly indicate the severe problems due to fatherless homes. And these statistics represent 63 to 90% of the social issues facing young people. These are youth suicides, homeless and runaway youth, behavior disorders, high school dropouts, kids that are in state institutions, and substance abuse, all coming due to fatherless homes. Research tells us that a father influences his children in many ways, most notably, number one, intellectual ability, the behavior his children will model, the generic background his children will receive, children's ethnic heritage and their position in the family structure, the occupational choices his children will make, the material resources his children are left with when he's gone, and the ways his children will behave toward their offspring. So what I'm saying in summary is coaches have a tough row to hoe because there are many more athletes than coaches. So for a coach to do his job of coaching, teaching, developing players, they're left with precious little time to be surrogate fathers. So in closing, I would say this. This is why I've spent 47 years of my life as a coach. Hopefully I've made a difference. And you as Wabash men have been challenged to make a difference. So I challenge you to uphold the mission statement of the college. My wife, Judy, and I have been married 47 years. And I want to say, and my wife's in the back, that you, as Wabash men, will always be considered a part of our extended family. We cherish the past 27 years, and I thank you for letting me share with you today. God bless. We love you. Thank you.
Coach House. Some quick announcements. First, congratulations to the Rhineys on their completion of Rhineship. The lacrosse team plays DePaul Friday on the football field at 6 o'clock. Please come out and show your support. Because of that, TGIF will be at Lambda Chi at 5 o'clock, trying to get people to come over to the lacrosse game afterwards. The second annual UPS Dia de los Niños is today. Also, today is Earth Day. Everyone should go replace the trees we lost the other night. Wabash Theater presents Our Country's Good this weekend. Saturday, golf is at Worcester, tennis is at Denison, baseball is also at Denison, and track is at Kenyon. Sunday, every sports team is pretty much at the same location except baseball travels to Kenyon. Thank you, and please stand to sing All Wabash.